I'm not grateful to be blind, but I am so grateful for Siri and Alexa, right? That I talk to all day long. So gratitude is not being grateful for the trauma. Gratitude is being grateful for what helps us navigate through the change.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. It started like any ordinary school day until the words on the blackboard disappeared. That was the moment Laura Bratton's world began to change. Diagnosed with a rare eye disease as a child, she lost her sight piece by piece, without warning, without a timeline, and without a map for how to keep going. But what she found in the dark reshaped everything. Today, Laura is a speaker, coach, and author of Harnessing Courage, Overcoming Adversity with Grit and Gratitude. And in this conversation, she opens up about what it really means to adapt, to grieve without becoming a victim, and to choose strength when every inch forward feels impossible. We talk about daily grit, honest gratitude, and how loving yourself through change might be the most radical act of all. If you've ever had to start over or are standing at the edge of something unknown, this is a story you'll want to hear. All right, Laura Bratton, thank you so much for being here on this Joyful Rebellion today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the honor.
Yeah, you are an author, a speaker. You've written a book, and you talk to people a lot about grit and gratitude. And in my experience, just going through life, no one comes to that place where they have experience with either grit or resilience or tenacity or any of those concepts unless they've been through some sort of a major event in their life, a major struggle, something that they had to rise to the occasion. And I want you to talk a little bit about what got you there and what that did for you.
Yeah, so it all started for me one specific day in middle school. So I'm sitting in middle school in geography class. Everything seemed to be normal, typical, status quo. And I look up at the board to start copying down the notes that the teacher had asked us to write down. And when I looked up at the board, all I could see was these black, blurry images. It wasn't letters. It wasn't defined numbers or shapes. It was just these fudgy objects. So I looked back down at my notebook, looked back up at the board, and all I saw were just these blurry black markings. So as a middle schooler, I leaned over to my neighbor and said, "How are you copying down the notes on the board? The print is not clear." Mm-hmm. Her answer was literally life-changing. She just leaned back over and said, "Laura, the print is completely normal. What are you talking about? I don't have any problems copying down the notes on the board." That's the moment that everything completely changed.
Yeah, because you realized there was something different from what you were perceiving than what they were perceiving.
Exactly. And my whole world had to change. And a few years prior, yes, I had been diagnosed with a very rare retinal eye disease. But the gift of being a 9-year-old at that time when I was diagnosed was I could see perfectly then. So my 9-year-old cognitive brain, I thought, well, I'm just always going to see this perfectly. What the doctors could not tell us was at what rate I would lose my sight. So there was no awareness that, hey, when you're in middle school in geography class, then you'll lose your sight. There was not a time that was able to be put on it so that we weren't expecting that quickly, that dramatic.
Wow. And it sounds like that day started out like any other day. You got dressed, you went to school, and you're sitting in geography class. Work us through that the next 10 minutes after you made that realization of, oh, there's something really going on?
So the reaction emotionally was complete denial. Oh, this is not really happening. This is not permanent. It's not that bad. By the time I finish high school, this will be completely over. This will be like somehow I'll just magically go back. I'll just pray my way out of it. I'll manifest my way out of it. My response was denial, denial, denial. After the denial was, and as I started high school, the emotional reaction was, I can't do this. This is too hard. I don't have the strength. Every single part of my life, of my day, has to change, and I have to figure out a new way to live. I do not have the strength. That was my emotional reaction.
Because it sounds like you didn't really have the thought in place, especially at your age, to prepare when you got the diagnosis, because you didn't have a timeline.
Right.
It's not like something you're prepping for and training for in 6 months. I need to be ready to live a life that's not seeing details, right?
100%. And I was starting to learn Braille like in middle school and starting to make different accommodations like that. But it's still on that emotional level, it was impossible to do what you said, to prepare, because we didn't know the timeline. So it wasn't like we could, almost the countdown, like you were saying, 6 months and this will happen, 9 months and this event will occur. There wasn't a way to emotionally prepare for like the huge, significant change.
So sitting there in that classroom, did a few minutes go by and then you raised your hand, the teacher came over and your parents came in? Like, what happened a little later that day?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I need to go to the principal's office. Like, I got to go to the nurse's station. Yeah, definitely was not able to get through the rest of the day. Again, just emotionally. It was so much to process. It was so huge, so significant.
And I bet your parents were freaking out too, because even though they had a heads up,
right,
it's like now, now her life's very different, and so is ours.
So is ours. Yeah. Now, how do we parent this child that now can't see anymore? And this is not in our family. It's not hereditary. We'd already done the whole family tree on both sides. All the testing that was available, this was brand new, completely new to all of us. We had no clue how to live as a person without sight.
Wow. So you're headed into your teenage years. You're not even there yet. And you started with denial, which seems completely normal and reasonable, right? And then you moved through the I can't do this. What was the next? Which was it? Did you decide, or did you just kind of, inch by inch, you started getting used to the way life was going to be?
That's where the grit comes in. As I'm saying, I can't do this. This is too much. I was overwhelmed with anxiety, panic attacks, overwhelmed with depression, so severely depressed. As I'm going through this emotional process, the gift was my parents would literally say to me every single day, we don't know how to navigate the future, so we will take it day by day by day. We will figure this out. So you said it perfectly. Inch by inch, it was our survival strategy. The goal would be just get up, get dressed, get breakfast, and get to school and get to high school on time. If you accomplish that for the day, we've all won. It's all great for the day. So again, just them constantly reminding me, take it day by day by day. And the other major gift that they gave me was this, I'm saying I can't, they didn't change their standards for me. So I have one older brother who's 5 years older. So as they are parenting me, as I'm in high school, losing my sight, they're parenting a son, getting ready to go to college, living out his dream of D1 football. So two completely different extreme experiences, yet their standards for me did not change. They didn't say, okay, you're now our disabled child, or you can't do anything, or you're less than your brother. They held those same standards. And a very, very practical example, what I mean by that, of how they held those standards, was one night in my teenage brain, I had a brilliant idea. I was decided, oh, I can use this blindness to get out everything I don't want to do. So I thought it was a great idea. So one night, one of my chores was unloading the dishwasher. When my mom said, okay, Laura, it's time to unload the dishwasher, you need to go unload the dishwasher. Again, in my brilliant teenage mind, I said, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to say to get out of this. So I said, oh, Mom, I can't unload the dishwasher. I can't put the silverware in the silverware drawer because I can't see perfectly. So I can't unload the dishwasher anymore. And she, being an elementary teacher, turned around and just looked at me and she just said, Laura, unload the dishwasher. And then she just walked away. And of course, at the time, again, in my teenage brain, I'm screaming, that's the meanest mom in the world. You know, like my dad heard her say that. He didn't say anything. Like, they're the meanest parents on the planet. What I realized is that was the greatest gift they gave me. They gave me in that moment. Because if she had said, oh, sweetie, you're right. Just go sit on the couch and just do whatever you want. I'll get your brother to unload the dishwasher. That would have taught me victim. That would have taught me you can use your situation to get out of what you don't want to do in life rather than continuing to reach your goals. By her saying, Laura, unload the dishwasher and holding me to that, that's exactly what I mean about holding those same standards. Both of my parents were saying through their actions, you're still you. You just might have to do it in a different way. You might know all the forks and spoons and knives. They might be not in the perfect place in the silverware drawer, but you can get them in the silverware drawer. So I share that to say that's what turned that I can't into, okay, maybe I can live this life. And again, that's what you said. It was inch by inch by inch. I slowly transitioned from one day that panic attacks would be less than the previous day. One day I would sleep better than the night before. So it was a slow progression of realizing maybe I can do this life because of the support I have around me is teaching me you can move forward.
And it's experiences like that in so many of the conversations I have with people when you're in it, when you're in the middle of those transformations in your life, you don't really look around and say, oh, yeah, I'm exhibiting grit.
Right.
It's when you get to look back over an amount of time and say, okay, I was taking it inch by inch, or I was taking it day by day. I was starting with things that were simple, like the silverware drawer.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
we built upon that. And then, wow, the
Right.
panic attacks got smaller. And then things started to happen beyond that. At what point, when you got through a lot of those years and some of those first times that you were really coming up against things that you had done before easily versus the way you had to do them differently in a moment, when were you able to look back and say, oh, okay, that's what grit is, and kind of recognize it in yourself?
Yes, it was in between, or once I graduated from high school and getting ready to start college, I got my first guide dog. And when you get your first guide dog, you go, well, any guide dog, doesn't matter if it's first, second, or 10th, you go to school, go to guide dog school for a month. So I share that to say I was getting ready to receive my first guide dog. And they had said, it was after lunch, go back to your room, just wait for us, and we'll bring your guide dogs to each person and start the process of training. It was that moment sitting there all alone, 3,000 miles away from home. I'm in San Francisco, grew up in the Southeast, so completely different worlds to me. That's when I realized, okay, this has been really, really hard and really, really traumatic. And I've had so much support that have shown me the grit. Now I have to trust myself and believe I have the grit. And so it was the process of receiving that guide dog that was exactly what you're saying. That's when I chose to embody, yes, it has taken a lot of grit to get through high school and to graduate. It will take a lot of grit to go through college and graduate in my major and move forward in my profession, all other areas of life. Yet I have to choose to have that grit day by day by day, not just one time say, okay, I feel grit today, so I'll have grit forever, right? I wish that was not easy. But to say, okay, Now I believe that I can start choosing to have that grit.
That comes up with so many things in life that are about changing identity, because
Yes.
you went from happy-go-lucky kid who could do all the things that every other happy-go-lucky
Right.
kid, and then you had this change in yourself, and now you were different from what even you remembered.
Right. 100%.
It sounds like your parents continued the same identity with a few exceptions, I'm sure. Things changed a little bit, but for you, like with your close friends, when you going through that period, what was it like changing from Laura, who was totally like the rest of them 6 months ago, to a year later?
Great question. With that identity piece was a huge amount of grief. So grieving the old me, who I used to be, grieving that, wow, I used to be excited just like my friends. Now I'm not. That makes me sad. That makes me anxious. That makes me angry. That makes me other than them. I don't like that as a teenager or college student, anything. So there's a huge amount of grief that I had to work through and process through, where I eventually got, again, and that grief process, again, it's just not as like the grid. It's not like, okay, I grieve one day and I'm done, check that box. But it's a continual process. And as I learned to work with the grief, to accept the grief, to embrace the grief, to live with the grief, that's when I started to rebuild my confidence and realize grieving is just a part of my new normal. And me being not sighted in a sighted world does not mean less than. It is what it is. And situation and encounter that I had with a mentor was incredibly pivotal in that identity moment. So I was getting ready to start college and I was talking to an administrator. And at the end of our conversation, end of our meeting, I'm sitting in her office with my new guide dog. And she said, Laura, I just want to let you know, you think you're done grieving, but the grieving process will continue for the rest of your life. And that is not a weakness. That doesn't mean you haven't accepted your blindness. That doesn't mean you can't move forward. You can grieve and move forward at the same time. You can grieve and be comfortable in your new normal at the same time. So I just want to give you permission that it's okay to grieve and to accept your new normal. That conversation gave me exactly what she said. It gave me permission to acknowledge the loss while also acknowledging this is just my normal. This is what my life is now, and that's okay. That's enough. Yes, I wouldn't choose it. Yes, I wouldn't. If I could change it, I absolutely would. Yet this is just the new normal. So again, I share all that because that was my process through the identity piece of grieving and then also realizing I can grieve while accepting the new normal.
There's a big difference between grief and, like you were alluding to a little while ago, taking on that victim identity. Right. And so you kept those two things separate, which is super healthy, realizing that you did need to grieve, you were going to continue to grieve, but that doesn't mean that you're stuck and that was who you are. You're much bigger than that. This is just something you're working with.
Right.
Wow. That's so huge right there, because I guess that's the birthplace of grit.
It is.
Right? Because
it is, and that,
realizing the difference between being able to grieve and not leaning into that as your identity. Woe is me.
As your crutch. I used to think this was so weird when people would say it, but now I get it so true. Grieving is a form of healing, is healthy. And I used to think, how is that healing? If I feel sad, if I cry all day, like, how's that helping me move forward? Yet that's the gift of grit. You can sit with that anxiety and choose, yes, in this panic attack, I'll choose to do what I need to do in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, hour. So yes, absolutely, definitely. Just as you said, the birthplace of grit is just living in both worlds and that being enough.
Being a speaker traveling all over the place, talking to groups, talking to individuals, talking to companies. I'm guessing that you meet a lot of folks who come up to you and say, "Oh gosh, Laura, you're such an inspiration." And then they start to tell you their story, and they may have things, and I don't want to belittle anyone's stuff because everyone's
Right.
got stuff. But I bet you've met a lot of people who are operating with limitations that objectively we might say, okay, that's
Right.
cool. Doesn't sound like something that
Right.
would be super limiting, like losing your sight, but it is paralyzing to them, or it creates a situation where they need to dig
Yes.
deep and find their grit.
Absolutely.
What has been your experience in some of those situations where you're talking to someone and they say, "Oh, this thing, I just can't get past it," and then they tell you what it is, and you're like, "You've got to keep a
Right.
straight face, right?"
Right.
And you can't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, your puppy ran away when you were 6 and you can't get over it," whatever it might be. What are some of the conversations that you had like that?
So you're 100% right. That's exactly what I hear all the time. You're so inspirational. You're so amazing. And my response to that is, I'm just human living every day, just literally taking it moment by moment, day by day by day. Even now, it's adjusted and living. I'm not in the trauma of adjusting from sight to no sight, but yet still living every day in a sighted world without sight. So, yes, I get those comments constantly of, you're so amazing. Let me tell you about, like, whatever example. My first response is acknowledging their loss. Because to them, if they're stuck in that, if they can't move forward, it's obviously a significant enough loss in their life that's preventing them from moving forward. So acknowledging that's terrible, that's horrible, what you went through. What are you going to do to take that first step? So rather than saying, "Oh, get over it, oh, move on," which sometimes I might think in my head, right? If I was being honest, they're inside my brain. The answer is, what is that first step you can do to move forward? Because that is more achievable than saying, "Oh, just move on, just get over it, dry up your tears, release your anger," like go to anger management.
Yeah.
All that's good, but that's so big, we can't accomplish all that in that moment. So that's my exact response, is acknowledging their loss and then saying, okay, what strategy can you do today? What is that one phone call? What is that one email? Who is that one person that you can do, and what action you can take today to move forward so that you're not stuck and limited by whatever happened?
At some point, you decided that you were going to write a book.
Yes.
And a book's a great tool. A person like yourself who has a message, who has an experience that they can relay, and they want to help other people, it's a natural progression to want to talk about that. And so you get in front of audiences and you can help that room full of people. And maybe it, ripple effect beyond that. If they have a loved one or a colleague or someone, they can share the story and get them interested. But then once you start putting words down on paper, that can go anywhere. So it just hits a bigger audience. That's the goal.
Yes.
Typically. And in that, you help more people. When you were thinking about this book, it's called Harnessing Courage, Overcoming Adversity with Grit and Gratitude. When you were writing that, who was the person you were writing it for?
So the person I was writing it for was for all of us, as we as individuals go through major change. We all experience change at some point in our life. Unfortunately, we should all experience it regardless of our circumstances. At some point, we are going to experience change. So my purpose, the point, the passion, my drive for writing the book was to be a resource to say, these are the two tools that I've used to navigate through the transition, through the significant change, and still use every single day. How can you also apply these tools to your life? So it wasn't specifically written, okay, if you're going through blindness, here's the book you need to read. But it was just, hey, if you're going through change, here's a book you can read as a resource. It was just that my change was blindness. So again, the audience is specifically for those people in the midst of change, needing that source of strength to help them move forward.
What are some of the stories that you've gotten from people who have read the book and been inspired or gotten a little bit more of that courage that they needed to keep moving forward? What are some of your favorites?
That has been the fascinating, the feedback that I've received has been all over the board for people dealing with cancer, dealing with suicide from a loved one, dealing with Parkinson's, MS, job change, a divorce, every different type of change you can think of. And what's been fascinating is people will say to me, oh, that story about ABC, I really connected with, and that's what I got most out of the book. And in my head, I'm thinking, wow, that was just a little story I threw in. I didn't think was that powerful. So it's been great. Yeah. That is what I loved about the feedback. People have connected, and every single person has told me a different story. It wasn't like they've all said, oh, that story is, I connected with the most. It's all been different stories, different points in the book they've connected with. And that just shows me, and again, teaches me, we connect in different ways. We all need that source of strength, that source of empowerment, yet how we receive it is completely different. Because what we need in different seasons of our life is different. So that has been incredible to receive the feedback, and just specifically the stories in the book, not what I expected people to grab onto the most or be life-changing.
Yeah.
So that has been absolutely wonderful.
You know, something you said a second ago makes me want to ask a question, because you do talk to a lot of people. And so when you hear these stories, you've got a lot of anecdotal data, I guess, that's compiled over the years. And I'm wondering now, you know, I just had a conversation, one of the podcasts that just dropped, I think it was last week, and he lived totally normal life into his mid 50s. And then he was diagnosed with this incurable cancer. It wasn't like a, you've got 6 months to live kind of thing. It was just, hey, we can't cure it, we can treat it. So there was this defining time in his life where he was, before being a cancer patient, his identity was different. It was the same in a lot of ways. He was still a dad, he was still a coworker, he was still a lot of things. But now he added on this new identity. And then there are some events that happen to us in life, death of a loved one, or an infidelity in a relationship, or a end of a relationship. Those are things that you can define parts of your life as before and after. Yes. But I'm wondering if something like a diagnosis where you get it, but you don't really feel different that day, and you don't feel different the next day, is similar to what happened when you were really young, and then eventually is sort of out there looming. You don't know when it's going to happen. And I would imagine that could be really paralyzing in itself. And have you found that situations like that are far different when you hear stories from people than, oh yes, my relative ended their life, and there was the day before that, and there was the day after that, and it was a very clear-cut thing? Whereas if you get a Parkinson's diagnosis, it's a gradual thing that is sort of hanging out there. How does grit manifest itself differently in those situations?
What I've found exactly in those situations is, and this goes back to the grief piece, the grief is ongoing. So it's not like what you were saying, like the clear cut, more acute situations. There's two parts of the grief. There's the anticipation. An example you were given, I know I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's. I know this will affect me sometime in my life. So you're constantly anticipating that. You're constantly wondering, what's my life going to be like? What's my life going to look like? Then when it actually happens, it might be similar to what you expected, or it might be completely different. So again, the grief process is just ongoing and long lasting. So again, learning how to have the grit within yourself to say, this is really hard. I don't like this. Yet it is what it is. What I can control is my response to it. And that is so much of the grit that I found. I love Angela Duckworth's work on grit. And that's a lot of what she talks about, is taking those long-term goals and breaking them down into grit, is those small everyday goals that we constantly set for ourselves. So the goal might be just get through the day, just survive the day, just get through the next hour, get through the next minute. That's the grit of choosing in those examples that you were given. It's ongoing. So choosing that grit moment by moment by moment, because the future is so overwhelming if we don't.
And tell me if I'm wrong. I bet I'm not, though, that a lot of people you talk to about your experience with that counselor, when that counselor gave you permission and helped you understand that leaning into and acknowledging your grief is not the opposite of grit. It doesn't cancel out your grit. It kind of fuels your grit a little bit because you can get that energy out and then keep pressing forward.
Yes, it actually is grit. You said it perfectly, because it fuels the grit, because then it gives you the power to say, okay, I can grieve and do something about this. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to be victim, be stuck in it, be limited in it? Or am I going to choose what I can around me? For example, specifically for me, it'd be, okay, I can choose to get a guide dog so I can safely navigate this world, rather than just sitting at home feeling sorry for myself. So yes, perfectly said. The grief fuels the grit and is a huge part of the grit.
And we've talked a lot about grit, but now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about how gratitude plays into this.
Yes. So for me, gratitude again, just like that conversation about grief, gratitude all started with a conversation that I had with a mentor. So as I'm extremely anxious, living in a state of panic, overwhelmed with depression, overwhelmed by my present and my future, a mentor of mine said, Laura, I want you to start writing down every day 3 things that you're grateful for. And I don't want you to repeat every day. I want them to be specifically events from that day, people, situations, 3 things that happened that day that you're thankful for. So in my southernness, I smiled and said, thank you. In my head, I was thinking, you are a terrible mentor and you don't need to be mentoring people. You need to change your job right now.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, I'm going to be your mentor. And so again, in my southern stubbornness, what did I do? I was like, oh, I'm going to prove her wrong, So I started writing down what I was grateful for. And the one day became 3 days. And the 3 days became a week. And a week became 3 weeks. What I realized is I thought she was teaching me, Laura, wake up every day and say, gosh, I'm so grateful for this blindness. This is wonderful. I'm so glad this happened to me. Rather, the gratitude she was teaching me and the mindset shift that I learned was be grateful for what helps you navigate through the change. So she was not asking me to wake up and say, gosh, I am so grateful to be blind. I recommend this to the whole world. She was asking me to wake up and say, this is hard, and I'm grateful for the guide dog that helps you navigate through the world. I'm grateful for those puppy raisers that raise the guide dog and the trainers that train the guide dog so I can navigate the world safely.
Yeah.
No, I'm not grateful to be blind, but I am so grateful for Siri and Alexa, right? That I talk to all day long. So gratitude is not being grateful for the trauma. Gratitude is being grateful for what helps us navigate through the change.
That's powerful. And one of the episodes that came out really recently, it was someone who had written books about happiness. And I treaded on that episode really lightly because in my experience with happiness, it's a choice you make. And I personally read lots of books on happiness, and they kind of say a lot of the same things. It's as soon as you choose to be happy, you'll be happy. And he framed it quite differently than I've heard before, though, which I really appreciated. And he said that in his experience, happy people tend to look at or focus on what they have. Yes. And unhappy people tend to focus on what they don't have. Yes. And what you're describing with gratitude is looking at what you have, being grateful for it.
Yes.
And not necessarily taking total attention away from what you don't have, but also not trying to trick yourself into taking your situation and forcing yourself to be happy about it. And I think, have you found in talking to people when you're doing speaking engagements, when you're doing book signings, any of those things that you're engaging with the public and they say, you know what, I thought gratitude meant I had to take my crappy situation and figure out a way to trick myself into being happy about it?
100% of the time. That's what every person says. I thought I had to be grateful and happy just all the time. Yes, both perspectives. So the perspective of thought I had to be grateful for my crappy situation, but also I thought I just had to walk around all the time being happy. I just thought I had to walk around all the time saying thank you to everyone. And that's not the point of gratitude that I've learned. Again, it goes back to that grit. Living with the grief and acknowledging, gosh, this is really, really hard. I'm really sad. And here's what I'm going to do about it. But I am grateful for whatever the situation is. So absolutely not just walking around being thankful all the time and saying thank you a million times a day, because that's just annoying. And then it just becomes rote and muscle memory, not genuine and embodied, but really using gratitude as a source of healing, like you said, to focus on what we do have. Again, I could walk around all day long saying, gosh, I don't have this, I don't have that, I can't do this, I can't do that. Yet I've chosen to say, I'm thankful that I can make adaptations and do what I need to do. And that's a big mindset shift as we go through change.
Yeah. And the light bulb that just went off for me is one of the ways this concept we're just talking about right now folds into grit. They kind of fold into each other. They feed off of each other, right?
Yes.
And you said this before, but it didn't hit me until just now. Grit is kind of saying, okay, what can I do? In your case, you would say maybe, okay, I can't see this thing, or I can't see this place where I'm going, but what can I do? I can get a dog to assist me with that.
Right.
I can contact the folks who know how to get me that resource. So you go down the list of things you can do. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're a little more challenging, but you do have control over at least exploring those options.
Right.
And just a little side rabbit hole here. How many people do you meet? Because I meet a lot, and I think we've all been this person who you don't really realize how much control, agency, and power you do have over things until you start playing around with it.
Right. Until we realize. Yes.
Yeah. What's your experience with that and with meeting people who, when you tell them, oh, well, until you choose to, whatever you might tell them in your own wisdom, and then a light bulb goes off for them and they're like, wait, I could do that?
So it definitely working with others, like this has happened to me and there's nothing I can do about it. And what I often point out is, yes, you can't do anything about changing the circumstances, but you can change how you respond. You can't change that you just lost that job or just got that diagnosis or whatever the change might be, yet you can change how you respond to that. And that, for the majority of people, both in speaking and working with people individually, they don't realize that. And not because they're not wise enough to realize it, just because you get so caught up in your circumstances, your situation. We get laser focused on the change, the problem. We forget that we do have power over our mindset, over how we respond to what's happened to us.
Yeah, and it's not really a fun message to hear, though. It's kind of like your mentor who said, write down 3 things you're grateful for. And you're like, what the heck? How's this going to work? So when someone comes up and says, yeah, you're totally in control of your mindset, and they're like, but, and every sentence starts with but after that, but I this, or but they that. And you're like, okay.
Well, and my response is always, okay, do like I did to my mentor. Go prove me wrong. And just see what happens. Like, if you don't believe me, that's okay, because I didn't believe my mentor either. Go prove me wrong. Like, do one thing today to prove me wrong. And then they're like, oh, wow, that actually worked. The next call we have, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm mad at you. That worked. So yeah, that's what I say. Okay, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's the only reason I got to graduate was I was out to prove my mentor wrong.
What message do you have for people who are at a place, maybe they've got a situation in their life, maybe they've got that identity that's shifting, and that could be something simple like the kids graduating high school,
Yes.
and that's perfectly normal. Everybody saw that coming, but now they're moving off
right.
to college and the house is going to be empty for the next few years. And so now that's an identity shift. It's a
Yes.
positive one, but that might be something where they say, okay, now what do I do? Who am I? I've got to figure this out. They go get Laura's book and they're going to learn about grit and gratitude. What's the main thing you want them to come away with?
Know that in that identity change, you are still enough. And I say that for the reason that so many people that I work with, that I speak to, adopt, and we all believe we're automatically not enough or we're not worthy, regardless if the change is good or bad. Just because it is change, that automatically puts a less than mindset. So my advice would be to know that in that change, good or bad, you are still a worthy human with gifts and a incredible purpose for each day, for this life. So trust that you are enough, that you are fully human in the change.
That's fantastic. And we didn't even talk about it. It's going to be in the show notes, of course. But if someone wants to connect with you, with your work, get you to come speak to their group or a copy of your book, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is through my website. So laurabratton.com has all the resources for the speaking, the coaching, and the book. So it's all there.
It's all right there. That's nice and convenient.
Yes.
Appreciate that for sure. Well, this has been so much fun. Is there anything that we haven't talked about? I know we went through a lot of kind of bounced around a lot of different topics. Try to keep it on grit and gratitude because that's such a huge part of the theme that keeps coming up on this podcast is the change of identity. And then what do you do? What do you do next? Sometimes people have to change their identity or it's been changed for them. They're no longer something they thought they were and they've got to figure out how to do it. Sometimes it's they no longer want to be what their identity has been and they want to move forward. They want to move beyond. So a lot of the grit, a lot of the gratitude practices you talked about are really instrumental in getting to that next part. But is there anything we haven't talked about you want to leave listeners with?
The last thing I'd love to leave listeners with is as you go through change, give yourself the self-compassion to acknowledge that change, that identity shift, whether you want it or it's happened and you did not want it. Acknowledge the difficulty of the change. Just like in the beginning, I talked about, I immediately jumped in that denial. If I'd given myself the space just to acknowledge that this actually is really, really hard and is a difficult transition to go from sight to no sight. So just giving ourselves that self-compassion, that self-love to acknowledge that when we go through change, it's hard. And that just is what it is. And then choose to love yourself enough to take that first step to do what needs to be done to move forward.
I love it. Well, thank you, Laura, so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation. This was a lot of fun. It was powerful. I mean, I love talking about this because it's that stuff that people hear and they're, oh yeah, gratitude. Yeah, I get it. I've seen the poster. It's cool. But until we really start to break it down, and I love dispelling the myths that you started talking about, you've got to be able to grieve. And some people think, oh gosh, grief. I thought grief was doing the victim thing, and that's the opposite of grit. And now that we break that down, we can kind of throw that aside and give people permission, which you did. Now they can move forward, and that's amazing. So thank you so much for being here and bringing this light into our day.
Absolutely. Thank you for the platform.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.